Leila is a student. She is 18 years old, and she is a first-year university student here in Rabat. Her passions include reading and traveling, and she defines herself as an introvert. But Leila, throughout her life, has been struggling with self-esteem issues. Her parents and teachers used to emphasize on her bad grades only. So she used to think of herself as not very smart, not interesting, and not special in any way. Last semester, Leila had to take a class at her university. And the first assignment in that class was a 240-question survey about strength. So her number one result, her number one character strength, was leadership. Leila thought to herself, that is not possible. Me, a leader? It's not possible. I cannot believe that. Well, at the end of the semester, Leila wrote the following course evaluation of that class. She said, that class literally changed my whole life. It transformed me in ways I can't even describe. For the first time in my life, I was being taught about how to know myself. And not only my weaknesses and what I should work on, but my strength as well. For the first time in my life, I was being taught about how to care and improve my lifestyle and my mind habits to feel happier and less stressed. So after years of self-hate, I started to love myself, and I started to believe in myself as well. That class was enlightening. Well, my name is Zineb, and I am a university professor, and that was my course's evaluation. Can you guess which subject this evaluation is about? Psychology, perhaps? Happiness? Or something else? Psychology? Well, I took 2 psychology courses when I was a university student. And I have to confess, as interesting and fascinating as these classes were, I did not feel that good about myself. I remember learning about mental illnesses and disorders and starting to recognize the symptoms in myself and in some of my family members and friends as well. And traditional psychology does that. It tends to focus on what is wrong with the human nature and try to fix it and heal it. So my question here is there another science, another psychology that focuses on well-being rather than ill-being? The answer to this question is yes. There is a branch of psychology, a subfield called positive psychology. What is positive psychology? Well, positive psychology focuses on studying what is good in human nature, what makes individuals flourish, what can improve our well-being, our mental and psychological strength and fitness. Here's a very simple analogy used by positive psychologists to explain what this field is about. Let's say you are given a land, a wild garden that had been neglected for decades, right? And your task is to make that garden as good as possible. In human terms, you want to make that garden thrive and flourish. What would you start with? For sure, you would want to remove, right, the bad herbs, the weeds. You would want to clean it up. And this could be referred to as what traditional psychology does. Focus on what's wrong, try to remove it, or fix it, if possible. Positive psychology says, while this is an important and necessary step, it is equally important for that garden to plant good seeds. You would want to have flowers and trees, right? So one way to remember it is traditional psychology tries to bring human beings from -10, -8 to 0. Positive psychology tries to study what can bring us, all of us, from 0 to +8, +10, 10 being very happy, of course. I don't know about you. Well, I know about you, but I have a little problem with the word happiness as well. It bothers me a little bit, perhaps because of the smiley face myth related to it, the pressure that we should and need to be happy and positive all the time, neglecting other natural human emotions such as sadness and anger. Or perhaps it bothers me because of all the trendy articles now using it as a selling point. You know those articles? The 10 secrets to happiness, making it sound like if there was a magical tea you would drink in the evening and wake up happy for a lifetime. And well, from a professor and researcher's perspective, that can be a little bit irritating. So is there another word or expression that would be more appropriate than happiness? My very modest experience has led me to realize that rather than happiness, it's more about well-being and resilience. It's more about full engagement with life, with its beautiful emotions, learning how to identify them and multiply them. But it's also about learning how to accept, welcome, and deal with our negative emotions, with life's obstacles and hardships in a resilient manner. And if I were in my classroom, I have some of my students here, I would underline and capitalize the word resilience. Why? Because life is not always easy, right? We face obstacles, hardships, challenges. We might face rejection, failure, unemployment, loss of loved ones as well. So it is very important, don't you think, to develop some kind of mind flexibility and emotional agility to not only deal with life's stressors, but hopefully even grow from it. So my question to you guys is, can we study our emotions, our brains, our minds, our habits, and develop some tools to help us? Or do the tools already exist? By a show of hands, who thinks the tools already exist? All right, a few hands here. I agree with you. A few years ago, I was fortunate enough to meet Professor Najib. And Professor Najib was the bridge between me and this fascinating field of positive psychology. Applied in an educational setting, a school or university, we refer to it as positive education. And I discovered a gold mine of scientific studies showing that not only we can have those tools, that well-being and resilience can and are being taught in some of the leading universities and schools in the world with significant results. To name a few of the results, we have increased life satisfaction, increased self-esteem and confidence, better creativity, more problem solving, and even better academic results. So for a few years now, I got to learn and train myself in positive education. And I still remember my aha moment when I decided to start my PhD journey in this field here in Morocco. After reading my students' evaluations, I discovered that the well-being and resilience class, or positive psychology class, was the largest class ever taught in Harvard University history, in Yale University, and other leading institutions. I found out that entire schools in Australia, the UK, Scotland, Mexico have adopted this approach. Even the prison system in South Australia with incredible outcomes. I found out that some countries try to harmonize all government programs and policies to achieve a happier society, like the UAE with the Ministry of Happiness since 2016, the Republic of Bhutan with the Gross Domestic Happiness Index. So even here in our continent, the first positive psychology conference took place last year in South Africa. So a movement is taking place, and it is truly exciting. My hope and biggest ambition is that Morocco will get on board as well. So you might be wondering now, what are those tools I mentioned earlier, right? Well, With the over 150 students a year, I try my best to plant those good seeds. I try my best to share those good and healthy mental practices for a flourishing life. There are many tools, but because we only have a few minutes here, I will share two highlights. The first tool is we reintroduce the practice of gratitude, the theory and the interventions as well. So repetition and consistency is key here. Every year, every semester, I ask my students to think about the person they're most grateful for. You can do the same exercise, by the way. The person they're most grateful for. And then I ask them to write a gratitude letter, mentioning all the reasons why. Then the moment my students love the most is when I call for volunteers to come up, call that person, and read the entire letter in front of everyone. This is very unusual for students, as you might guess, and I usually get a few giggles, nervous laughter as well, but usually once the first student goes, others follow. I'll share with you a small, short story from last semester. I had a student, his name is Adam. He had just lost his grandfather, but didn't have the courage to attend the funeral and be there for his grieving father. And he was in my class that day. But he apologized in the beginning of the session for his inability to participate in any class activities, which I naturally understood. So while his classmates were writing their gratitude letters, he was simply staring at the blank paper. After a while, he discreetly told me, "The person I'm most grateful for is my father. But in my 19 years of life, we never expressed gratitude or love in my family." That class was so extraordinary and the emotion was so contagious that Adam, at the very end, volunteered. He called his dad, and for the very first time, they both expressed gratitude and love. Adam came to me later on to say that that was a defining moment for him in his life and in his relationship. And when you know that a 75-year-long Harvard study showed that the quality of our relationships is the #1 predictor of life satisfaction, you can imagine what regularly expressing gratitude can do for our well-being. So we also introduce gratitude diaries because consistency and repetition is key. We also discuss and actually implement kindness projects, resilience development workshops, relationship development as well. We also introduce notions of meditation and mindfulness in this class. The second tool, very empowering, that I would like to share with you today is the character development education. When I ask my students, "Can you tell me what is your #1 strength?" Most of them usually look at me and say, "Professor, I don't know what my strengths are, but I can write a book about my weaknesses and what I should work on." Yet, being able to identify and cultivate your strength is very important for your mental well-being. I remember how everyone could witness the way Leila, the student I mentioned in the very beginning, naturally unleashed and effortlessly unleashed her wonderful leadership potential that was naturally part of who she was. Leila was thriving in her projects and leading her team with an impressive ease. When you do that, when you identify your character strength and you practice them, you experience something that is very important for our mental well-being, something that psychologists refer to as flow. Flow is a state of complete engagement. I took that survey. I took that scientific tool developed by researchers at the University of Pennsylvania, and my strengths include love and love of learning. And when I'm doing my job, when I am teaching my students or preparing for my classes, I do experience that state of flow, a state where you lose the sense of, you lose yourself, and yet you are purely yourself. You also lose a sense of time. You know that feeling when time flies? This is what musicians experience when playing their instruments. This is what authors experience when writing their books, chefs when cooking, athletes when running, and Leila, my student, when leading her team. The world is changing rapidly. We can all witness how progress and modernity are spreading. Cars are getting faster, buildings are getting taller, phones are getting smarter, right? But what is the point of all of that if people are unhappy and unfulfilled? Or even worse, suffering from depression and chronic stress? Mental health is said to be the biggest global issue in the future. So what will be the point of all of that if we are still struggling with ourselves? I believe in the power of education, and I dream of an educational system that goes beyond the intellect only, the traditional subjects that we know, math, biology, and reading. I dream of an educational system that cares to educate the entire being, the mind, yes, but the heart, the body, the soul, never neglecting the undeniable interconnections between them. One of my favorite psychologists, Dr. Leah Waters, said that before the Industrial Revolution, teaching arithmetic, teaching reading, and writing was considered a revolution. Likewise, teaching for well-being, teaching for resilience and character development will take some time to sink in and be considered normal. So while waiting for schools and universities to formally establish that, we can all take ownership of our own long life education. We can all be like Leila and Adam and care about our own well-being, our own character development. So I will leave you with one of my favorite proverbs. Watch your thoughts, they become your words. Watch your words, they become your actions. Watch your actions, they become your habits. Watch your habits, they become your character. Watch your character, it becomes your destiny. Thank you very much for listening.